Hey folks, it's been a while since I have done a live video on here. I didn't make any announcements of this. I thought I'd just go live because it's something I'm going to do that's going to be kept really if you want to watch this later or at another time. It's been suggested to me that I do some readings of some of my books online. And hey, Kitten, how are you doing? And so it was my wife Raini said to me, you ought to take some of your books and do some of the readings and put them up on your YouTube channel. So while this is a bit unconventional, I'm not doing an interview with Jeff or with Rocky or with anybody else, and I'm not really doing commentary on anything. I'm going to be reading a little bit for you from the prologue of my book. And you know, if it works out well and people like it, we may read the whole book and you'll have the audio book. But this was my first book published by New Page Books, called The Rise and Fall of the Nephilim. And I wrote this book back in 2011, and it was published by New Page Books. But it's a question that has been on my mind for 35 plus years. As many of you know, if you listen to my channel, if you listen to many of the interviews I do and radio shows I do with Rocky and Jeff, you remember that I started questioning certain things about my faith way back in my seminary days. And we're talking 1980, right in that time. And one of the first big questions I had theologically was about the Nephilim. And so this has been with me for quite a long period of time. And if you have listened to me on radio over the years, since this has been published, you've heard me talk an awful lot about the Nephilim. But if you haven't had a chance to read the book, I thought, hey, I'll give you a little audio book, and how often do you get the author to read? So I'm going to do some readings from the book. I'm going to read the prologue tonight. We're not even going to get into the meat of the first chapter, but I'm going to give you the prologue. It's going to take about 15 minutes, maybe 20. I'm not sure. I haven't ever timed it. And so if you enjoy this, stick around now, or you can turn it off and you can join later. Take a look at it later and listen to it at your leisure. Now, The Rise and Fall of the Nephilim. Once again, this was my first book with New Page Books. It was published in 2011. And I'm going to start reading for you out of this book. And if you don't have the book, you can still pick it up. Now, New Page Books has been acquired by Red Wheel Weiser. And so you can still find the book out there. It's on Amazon. But let me do some reading for you. I may stop and do a little commentary along the way, but I'll try to keep that to a minimum so you get a feel and a sense of the book itself. And I want to say hi to everybody that's there live right now. Kitten, I said hi to you. And Mark, Sinner Saint, nice to have you here. And this is an audiobook teaser, yeah. And you can, by the way, you can get this in audiobook on Amazon. But now I'm going to read this for you because I think it's going to be fun. And Kitten, once again, thank you. And so here we go. This is The Rise and Fall of the Nephilim, and it's subtitled The Untold Story of Fallen Angels, Giants on the Earth, and Their Extraterrestrial Origins. Now, I'm going to tell you something. Since I've written this book, I've pretty much determined that the Nephilim have nothing to do with angelic beings. Now, this was a title that my publisher gave the book. I think when I originally wrote the book, I called it simply Nephilim. And they wanted something a little juicier. So there you go. Now, here we go. I'm going to skip by the foreword. And the foreword was written by Craig Hines, who wrote the book. He authored A Gateway of the Gods, and he was a big inspiration for me to write this book. And so let's get into the introduction. I hope you'll enjoy this. Sit back, get your favorite beverage, get some popcorn, make some comments if you want. I'll try to look over and see if there's any comments in the live chat. And if I feel the need, I might make some commentary as we go. Here we are. Now, my eye contact's going to be on the book, obviously. As a kid, I spent far too many nights lying atop my mother's garage. With arms folded beneath my head, I'd stare into the starry sky, consumed by my childhood fantasies of becoming a starship captain who would boldly go into that endless black, seeking new life and new civilizations. Yet it was more than just growing up a product of pop culture and the science fiction of the 1960s and 70s that fired my curiosities. Where something deep inside told me that we were not alone in this infinite stretch of expanding universe. And I longed to know the answers to the age-old questions of why am I here and where do I come from? Those questions were probably not as articulated in my mind as they seem when I recount them here and now, but they gnawed at me just the same. On some primordial, undefined level of my genetic makeup, within every cognitive, rational human being lies that nebulous, unanswered haze that rises to the surface every so often, yearning to have answers. And yet, most of our lives, we shamble through the years, wholly unaware that those desires smolder deep down inside. We subconsciously suppress any wild, weird notions that there just might be answers beyond the realm of what we think we already know and accept. Human beings walk around this world feeling absolutely unconnected to the greater world and the universe around them. As a race, we've forgotten how to make this connectivity. And this ties into all aspects of how we perceive ourselves, our loved ones, our politics, our jobs, our careers, our deities, our personal spiritualities, and our place in the great order of things. Sure, like many kids growing up in America during the late 1960s and 70s, I attended Sunday school and was taught about the origin of man from a Genesis chapter 1 perspective. And for many years of my life, that was the only source point to which I subconsciously hailed. It was as if the stories of creation were settled long ago in that unquestioning little child's understanding of how things work. The curiosities and questions that rose later in life from the mental depths were somehow summarily squashed by the teachings that had been put into my head so many years earlier. But little did I know, for it was something that was never taught, but always skipped over, avoided, misinformed, or never mentioned, that the very book from which we dogmatically drew our genesis held secretive, mysterious, encoded messages about origins, visitations, and beings not of this world. What was once accepted without question as the mystical, magical, miraculous stuff of ancient biblical stories suddenly took on a very different perspective once I opened myself to the idea that there was more to those stories than I had been told, and much more brewing beneath the surface of what I had been taught. Now, just as an aside, those of you who follow Jeff Dougherty, you understand what he means by unindoctrinate yourself. And by the way, those of you who have joined in, let me just say hi to Anton. I don't know if it's Anton or Antone. And Charlie, good to have you here. And if you didn't catch the beginning, I'm reading from my book, The Rise and Fall of the Nephilim. We're going to go through the prologue tonight. Let me pick up where I left off. Remove yourself for a moment to a place somewhere in a more shadowy past, before the days of modern psychological discipline and scientific advance, a time when we, the human race, believed that our life's fortunes, illnesses, woes, and serendipitous happenstances were firmly rooted in the spiritual and the supernatural. As we evolved our minds and our technologies and sciences, we learned more and more about the mind and body, universal expansion and entropy, geological tectonics, and the movement of our solar system around a somewhat smallish star that burned in the Milky Way galaxy. Along the way, we dispensed with our reliance on the ethereal, casting aside our need for gods, devils, and every caste of angel, devil, and spirit in between. We corporately tuned out our hearts and tuned our minds to the methodological pragmatic, allowing science and skeptical thought to successfully supplant faith in that great something bigger than ourselves. Quantifiable fact became the inevitable surrogate for the misty stuff of myth and legend. And while we may not have totally thrown out the baby with the bathwater, we have successfully become a culture that discounts anything that can't be measured by the scientific method, casting aspersions on experiential faith, and even the slightest adherence to anything that smacks of an older spiritual belief system. The paramount endeavor that occupies most of the recorded history of man, or of the human race, after the history of war, that is, which sadly seems to be synonymous with the history of mankind, is the great quest for discovery. The seeking out of the who's, the what's, where's, why's, and how's of our existence. And yet, while attempting on that quest to adhere to a strict, quantifiable source, we have let go of the spiritual, the innocuous, the insubstantial, airborne flotsam that, when you actually look at it, seems to permeate every facet of being, down to the very spark of life itself. So what if the outmoded, outgrown, discarded superstitions, the things of the unseen, the unwanted realms, really do have their basis in some sort of truth? What if the superstitious banalities we brushed aside in the broad swath of our skeptical scientific hand were truly the evidentiary stuff of things not seen, the substance of a very real universe that dwelt and operated just below the surface of the visible, tangible world around us? What if there truly exists a viable, legitimate source code that at times finds its way through the barrier that divides the diaphanous from the substantive? What if science ain't the end-all and be-all of the universe, and we really are surrounded by forces of good, evil, light, and dark? What if there really are living, vibrant beings who dwell and function beyond the veil of the dimension of the here and the now? Nearly every ancient culture has in its annals mythological tales of supernatural beings who came to the earth for the purpose of intermingling with human beings. And out of these early encounters came the many subsequent accounts of an ancient universal flood imposed by a god or superior being for the purpose of wiping out the offspring created by the supernatural intercourse between these beings and humans. In the ancient pan-cultural understanding, these beings are referred to as angels, demons, spirits, and even gods. The question that begs to be asked is, were they actually part of some spiritual hierarchy, of a better were they angelic and demonic beings, or were they only labeled as such for lack of a better understanding? Are we seeing the experimental contact of humans with angelics and demonics? The experiential contact. This is what you get when you don't have outtakes. Are we seeing the experiential contact of humans with angelics and demonics? Or are these supernatural descriptions for the only mode of illustrative labeling that ancient man had for understanding who and what they encountered and experienced? Were there supernatural beings who descended and cohabited with humans, bequeathing an offspring of giants, as many cultures purport? Or is there a physical, extraterrestrial connection? Was there a doorway open from another dimension, another dimensional reality, through which beings who could be described by ancient man as nothing less than angelic or godlike who visited this dimensional plane? And hey, she said it, how you doing tonight? In some of the apocryphal, non-canonical writings, 3 books excluded from biblical scripture by the Council of Nicaea, well, that's where it began. There's a note I'll make on the side. I laid it all at the feet of the Council of Nicaea. It only really began at the Council of Nicaea, this canonizing of Scripture and removing books that they didn't feel anonymous, or I'm sorry, that's not anonymous. What's the word I'm looking for? Unanimously agreed belonged in Scripture. Those books excluded from biblical Scripture by the Council of Nicaea during the reign of Constantine in 325 of the Common Era, we are told of a group of beings known as the Watchers, who orbited the earth with the divine mandate of watching over mankind, but who also desired to take on the self-imposed task of descending to the earth to teach certain skills to human beings, ultimately resulting in a cohabitation and sexual intermingling. The result was a race of godlike progeny known as the Nephilim. Now, I'll just take a moment to make just a brief commentary here, is that these are the things we weren't taught when we were kids. And all of this stuff, you can find it mentioned in the book of Genesis, but detailed in the book of Enoch. And Enoch was one of those books that was removed and put in the non-canonized Bible, in the apocryphal books, because they couldn't come to a unanimous agreement that it belonged in the Bible. So there it sits. If you pick up a Catholic Bible, you'll find it in there. You can also now buy copies of the Book of Enoch. All the questions and skepticism of its writing notwithstanding. The word itself, Nephilim, finds its source in biblical scriptures, both canonical and non-canonical. And that is why the study in this book will focus on these texts, at least as a starting point. There were giants in the earth in those days, and also afterward, so says the biblical book of Genesis. When the sons of God looked upon the daughters of men and found them fair, and took of them wives as they chose. The bequeathed descendants became the mighty men of old, the men of renown. The literal translation of this passage reads something like, "The watchers came and took human wives for themselves, as many as they wanted. Their children were the Nephilim of old, the giants." And the accounts of these beings can also be found in the books of Jasher and Jubilee, and the more recently discovered Dead Sea Scrolls, the Book of Giants. The ancient Irish wrote of shining gods, giant shining gods. I lost my place. Called the Tuatha De Danann, who later became the elven folk of lore and Celtic mythology. The Middle Eastern and Mesopotamian cultures have the Anakim, the Anuna, the Anunnaki, and Rephaim, along with other beings and races described as having descended from giant Nephilim forebears. The Norse mythologies make reference to Niflheim, the underworld ruled by the goddess Hel. The Hindu Vedas and the Puranas tell us of an antediluvian or pre-flood giant god, Daitya, and the race of the giant Andinari. Native American cultures speak of highly elusive, giant, hairy, big-footed creatures that roam the American forests, just as Tibetan mountain peoples tell age-old tales of similar, equally elusive giant creatures in the Himalayas. The Greeks have their Titans, and the ancient Sumerians have their flood epic of Gilgamesh, the giant half-god, half-man. While these peoples, religions, and cultures are widely diverse, their giant and flood mythologies, pictographs, and folklore all seem to have common historical linkages. In the pages ahead, we'll explore these varied accounts and mythologies, drawing the obvious and sometimes not so obvious connections and similarities. Let me just take a look over in the chat to see if anybody's got, she said it, there can be arguments put forward for dimensional, angelic, and inner earth or ET finger in the creation of us all. I could probably debate any given angle. I agree with you. So here, let's continue on. And I'll keep trying to look over at the chat. I'll stop every now and then and make some brief commentary. Just a few pages left. If, like me, you attended Sunday school as a kid, we were taught that God sent a great universal flood to the earth to wipe out the wickedness of mankind, sparing only one righteous man and his family, along with pairs of every animal on earth and 7 of the ritually clean ones. They all took refuge in a great barge for some 120 days, waiting out the deluge and the receding of the waters. The same story is told in many other ancient records, with varying plot twists and a different cast of characters. But common to nearly all stories is the root account of extraterrestrial, extra meaning from without, terrestrial meaning of this earth, or celestial beings, who descended to the earth for the purpose of intermingling with humans and having children with them. And common to most ancient accounts is the wrath of a superior being who wages judgment on the earth in an attempt to destroy the hybrid descendants as a result, seemingly to no avail, as they're mentioned as being in the earth in those days and also afterward. Cultural traditions from all around the world have myths and legends telling of angelic beings who descended to the earth and interacted with human beings, ushering in some sort of cataclysmic, worldwide destruction of humanity that left scant few survivors. When analysis of the languages used in the various accounts is compared, blatantly similar facts emerge, revealing a commonality between the varied cultural tales, substantiating a sort of corporate mythos. Flesh and blood beings who were revered as gods interacted with humanity in the most intimate of ways. While there is a lack of scientifically repeatable evidence, there exists a sum of recorded history combined with diverse extant religious texts that comprise a broader picture of antediluvian races and events. Because these things cannot be quantified by the standards of the scientific method, it's like, can you please bring some celestial beings and human women into the lab so we can run some tests and repeat. You can't gauge this by the scientific method. So because they can't be quantified by the standards of the scientific method, do the plethora of ancient accounts establish any sort of verifiable proof of a crossover between interdimensional or interplanetary races? I believe they could. And that is what I will address in the pages of this book. While the data is not repeatable for scientific experimentation, the historical annals speak loudly and clearly. When there exists such localized myths in geographical regions repeated by other localized myths in other faraway geographical regions over and over again, there is a certain scientific methodology at play. There is a message revealed. Almost more importantly than the physical, textual references and evidences are the spiritual implications that can be drawn. Beyond the accounts of giant beings and extraterrestrial intercourses with humans, we have the spirituality of the matter, spanning the gaps between dogmatic theologies and firmly held systematic beliefs, spawning a broader interconnectivity between religions, cultures, and spiritualities. It is my personal belief that there is much more to discover than has been revealed. And the more we hypothesize, ponder, explore, research, study, and meditate on this wide array of scriptures, facts, folklore, stories, and writings, the more we engage in a responsible dissecting and evaluation of the living, breathing existence of these beings. Now, I just see that Jeff Dougherty popped on. I may have a little competition with Jeff's show. Keep in mind, I'm going to save this, so if you don't want to sit around, you want to go see Jeff, you can always pick this up later and listen to it a bit later. So those of you who are watching this as a recording, Jeff's not on live now. But those of you watching live, he just popped in. So now you may well ask what qualifications and credentials I possess to write of such things with any modicum of authority. I could hold up my years of incomplete degreeless education in Bible college and master's program, in seminary as sources for much of what I learned about biblical scripture, But as I have alluded to previously, that education simply left me wondering more about the things, I lost my place, that I had not been taught. It left me wondering more about the things that I had not been taught. If exploration and discovery is at the core of every heart and mind, then seeking out the answers by means of personal study and research is what I am presenting here in this book. In other words, this is not a master's thesis, it's not a doctoral thesis. This was my own personal study over 30 years. Well, it really kind of funneled down to studying over several months to write the book after 30 years of contemplating this stuff. So we are all scholars, and we all bear a responsibility of rooting out the facts and seeking truth. While this book certainly should never, ever be held up as a quotable resource for universal truth on these matters, it is one person's attempt to find answers that do not simply and blindly follow the dictates of a single belief system. While this effort may represent my early years of speculative imaginings, rounded off by more years of education and scholarly research, I would call this a work of my heart as opposed to a scholarly tome that will be held as the absolute authority on the topics contained herein. I have many more questions than I have answers, but these pages represent honest, educated research that will, hopefully, lead you down a path to your own conclusions and your own discoveries. There is so much more out there than what we've been taught. There is so much more out there to discover, uncover, and seek out. And then there is that still small voice. My friend Craig Hines, author of Gateway of the Gods, made reference in his book to a small, quiet voice that had been speaking to him, not audibly, but deep in his subconscious, telling him to square the circle. Like Craig, I have struggled with seeking and finding the answers to questions that delve much deeper than what seems to be lying on the surface. My entire life, I have known that there is something lying just beyond the borders of the familiar, reaching far beyond systematic theologies and entrenched dogmas. Before we ever met face to face, I found Craig, through the vehicle of his writing, an able, unwitting ally to my quest to make the square peg of my quest fit into the round hole of the universe. There's an Old Testament passage where the prophet Elijah, desiring to have a face-to-face encounter with God, is shown a phenomenal sequence of divine events passing by him as he is standing in the cleft of a rock face. Wind, earthquake, and fire. The noise of theophany is overwhelming, but it is only with the palpable quiet of the aftermath that God spoke in the sound of a sheer silence. It is that same stunning silence, that still small voice, that is whispered in both Craig's ears and my own. When you experience the calm stillness of an almost revelatory realization that the seemingly random dots connect, a complete picture starts to materialize and come into full view. As a result, both Craig and I have, in a sense, stumbled upon the conclusion that we have been asked to square the circle. Something Craig reminded me of in his private, handwritten note on the title page of Gateway of the Gods, the copy of his book that he gave to me. For most of my life, I have insisted that as much as we live and dwell in a natural world, we live and dwell in a supernatural one. The natural and the supernatural are one and the same, and do not exist and function independently of each other. In fact, there is no supernatural. There is only the living, breathing, substantive world and universe around us that ebbs and flows in its own mysterious ways. For me, this book is about coming to terms with the religious efforts of man to explain the misunderstood and find a better understanding about the things we thought we once knew all there was to know about. Squaring the circle is my realization that all things are connected. All religions are connected. All spiritualities are connected in a great web of understanding what and who we are, where we're going, and how we are supposed to get there. I want this book to stand as another effort in attaining that equation. And there may even be theories put forward in these pages that cause you to wince a little bit in pause as you attempt to assimilate the information and conclusions offered. Ancient mankind was visited by beings of another dimension or from a distant star who intermingled, seeded, reseeded, and in some cases re-emerged in their interaction with the human race. There are remnants and evidences all over the world in every culture. All one need do is look. Ancient biblical and apocryphal texts tell us that the Nephilim were on the earth in those days and also afterward. And as it was in the days of Noah, so shall it be in the end times. So sit back in your favorite reading chair or with your headset on. Grab your itty-bitty book light, devour, absorb, and cogitate. Agree or disagree. Above all else, examine and dissect the materials in this book by going to that place where the trappings of societal sterility cannot reach your desire to see things with other eyes. Discard what you think you know and see the world and universe around you with a fresher yet ancient, unjaded view. Draw your conclusions based on an openness to know, rather than allow current thought to dictate where you take your beliefs. Ask yourself questions and seek the answers to those questions. Enjoy and ask yourself how you can find a way to square the circle. Sounds an awful lot like unindoctrinate yourself, doesn't it? So there you go, folks. That was the prologue to my book, The Rise and Fall of the Nephilim. Oh, and I want to read this for you. This is something George Norrie, Coast to Coast, wrote a little testimonial, and it's printed right here on the front cover. He said, Carl Sagan once spoke of the need to balance the scientific method with pure, unadulterated wonder. Scott Allen Roberts picks up the mantle by examining the Nephilim, the hybrid offspring of the intercourse between human women and ancient extraterrestrials. If only for just a moment, kick out the props of science and religion and let Scott take you down that can't read it without my glasses on, take you to that place where sometimes the questions tell us more than the answers. That was George Norrie from Coast to Coast. I might as well read the one on the back, too. This was from, if you remember, Bill Burns from UFO Hunters and many other things that he's done. If you've gone to Sunday school and read Genesis, you've no doubt encountered the mystery of the Nephilim, the strange giants whose offspring mated with the offspring of Adam and Eve. Who were these creatures and how did they get here? The rise and fall of the Nephilim is sure to challenge your beliefs and get you to look at the other side of creation. So there you go, folks. That's my first book with New Page Books. If you like this, just like it below. Write some comments if you'd like. I'll go through the chat here with you for a few minutes. And although I'm cutting into Jeff's show a bit, I suppose I don't need to mention that, do I? Because we're both our shows will be you'll be able to see them in archive. But I'm going to go forward if you like it, and we'll do chapter after chapter. Try to do a chapter at a time. And I like to write shorter chapters, and I'll just give you just a little taste here. I'm not going to read the chapter, but chapter 1, which is the next part I'd read, it's called Science Almighty. And it starts with these two quotes. I put two quotations at the beginning of each chapter. Science is built up of facts as a house is built of stones. But an accumulation of facts is no more a science than a heap of stones is a house. And that was Henry Poincaré Science and Hypothesis in 1905. He wrote that. And then Carl Sagan said, I spent a lot of time at age 8 experimenting, commanding stones to levitate. Esser inats. It never worked. I blamed my pronunciation. So that'll be the next chapter, or chapter 1, actually, Science Almighty. So let me take a look over at the chat here. I'm going to go back into the into some of these. Let's see. We'll go back to the beginning. And it's an audiobook teaser, that's for sure, Mark. Kitten, yay, awesome. She says, thank you very much, Kitten. Nephilim or Rephaim? Both, Anton. And Charlie says, hello. The Rephaim were the giants, yes. The Nephilim were supposedly giants as well. But I've interpreted that a little bit differently. At the beginning of this book, I was still weighing out whether or not angels were the Nephilim, the Watchers. Who were these people? Were the Watchers? And some more train of thought I've used as well since I wrote that book, what is it now, 8 years ago. And I'm looking at possibly writing a follow-up with Red Wheel Wiser. I've already talked to them about it. But looking at the whole angelic issue versus the non-angelic issue, this cover of this book mentions seeking out the angelic forces. Well, I don't believe that the fallen, that or that the those who came down and intermingled were fallen angels at all, because you don't find the word angels in the Hebrew related to them. The word in the Hebrew for angel is malach. And you put the im at the end. Just like Nephilim, you've got malachim, is angels, the plural. And you don't find that. What you do find, though, is the Elohim, the B'nai Ha-Elohim in the Hebrew. Those who are of the Elohim. Those who are of the God of many gods. And we'll get into that more another time. So, and Anton, it says there. There we go, Anton. Let's see. Read about Azazel. We'll get to him. Yep, like the Anunnaki. And let me just go and see. We saw She Said It's. Hercules, yes. Atlas, etc. Some of those demigods can fit into the picture. Let's see. The Grigori. The Grigori and the... why am I losing? There was the mythical beings in Hebrew mythology that were the giants. Grigori, but there was another word. It'll come to me as we're going. And they were these almost like these jinn type of characters, which if you saw Jeff's show last night, Rocky and I were on, and we talked about the jinn a little bit. Let's see. Floods were meant to cleanse the earth of the giants. Yep. And as a matter of fact, if you learned in synagogue or Sunday school that the reason for the flood was the wickedness of mankind, that's the way it sounds in the English. You have to go back to the text in the Hebrew, the way it's written. And it's really talking about the wickedness brought to mankind. The wickedness of mankind is the thing that was brought to us that was wicked, and that God needed to wipe that out. And that wickedness. Conversely, they talk about Noah being the only righteous man. Well, it says he was righteous, but it also says he was pure in all his generations. Physical description. In all his generations back to Adam, he was pure-blooded. And it was referring to this whole serpent seed, the split seed of the Cain seed and the Seth seed. We'll get into that more a little later, too. Let's see. Scott Linson says, hey, Scott, I don't know if you're still out there, but good to have you here. Sorry I didn't see you when you popped in. You too, Scotty. Jeff should coordinate. Don't want to miss either of you. Yeah, we really should. This was just an afterthought. I mean, it's midnight out here on the East Coast. I started, around 11:30? So I thought Jeff was kind of all done. So I'll talk to him, and we will do that. We'll coordinate so we don't overlap each other. Let's see. Oh, you're listening. Mark's listening to both. And I'll get out of here pretty quick within a couple of minutes here. And I may go over to Jeff's channel. Jeff just ended, Mark said. So it must have been a shorty. Let's see. That was fast. We all bad here. Great point of view on, oops, I just jumped way ahead. On the squaring the circle. Thank you. Thank you, Mark. It's not on Audible, but if you go to, this book is available on Amazon. If you go to Amazon, there is a link to pick up the Audible book. So the recorded book. So it's out there. Let's see. Are the new Nephilim AI are the new Nephilim Rephaim? Very possibly. That's more an interpretation, probably, than an actuality. But I think that's a good way to put it. Impressive writing style. Thank you, Mark. Let's see. I love being read to. I've always read to my kids the whole life. You know, when my twin daughters, and by the way, I'm sitting in their studio right now, their big warehouse studio. As you've heard over the last couple of weeks, I've been out here painting. Well, this mural, there's part of the mural right there on the back wall, but there's like 75 more feet of it going that way, or as the corner turns here. And so when they were babies, well, weren't even babies yet. They were in vitro. They were in mama's tummy, to say it very kindly, in a family way. I used to read to them. I had heard that babies respond to not just mom, but they will recognize their dad's voice as well, because they can hear you through that stomach wall, that womb wall. And so I would sit down next to them and I would read to them and I'd talk to them. And I remember I read Treasure Island to my twin daughters before they were born. And you should have seen the way my wife's stomach moved when I would start talking and start reading to them. And I read Treasure Island and I used all the voices, I was Long John Silver, and I would talk like that. And, and Jim Hawkins and all of that. And so I read in the phonetic language, and I used the accents. And my daughters, I don't know if I can attribute it to this. My daughters, well, first of all, they knew my voice when they came out. And I read to them constantly as kids. And they are voracious readers now and always have been. And I really liked that about them. I've read to my other kids as well. And I like to read stories to my kids all the time. So I'm glad. Who said that? Was it Mark said I love being read to? I missed it. I lost it. Whoever said that. I'm looking to it right now. I love being read to. Oh, that was Jeannie. Hi, Jeannie. And I'm glad you love being read to. I love reading to my kids. And I've read some good books to them. Just in the last year, we've read things like To Kill a Mockingbird. We've read a couple of other books from Lauren Wolk, which are very good books. Read to my 9-year-old son. Last year, we read John Carter of Mars, and he absolutely loved those books, Edgar Rice Burroughs. Read The Hobbit and read all kinds of other little books in between. So it's good to read to your kids. Michelle, I'm glad that you were excited for the shower. Been listening, Scotty. Just exited the shower. Right on. Listen to me in the shower. And let's see. It says that the Nephilim were angels. I explained that a little bit earlier. They weren't angels. The word for angel doesn't appear in the Hebrew. They were Elohim. Go look up Psalm 82, and you'll get an idea. You're going to be reading it in English, but it's the same beings. It's the Elohim. You've got Elohim speaking to the divine council, which was the Elohim. And there he's called that. And he said, "You are all Elohim, the bright shining princes of heaven." He declares them in that chapter. So Let's see. So you just exited the shower. The Nephilim were angels. Are they the same as the Naga in the Hindu myth? Maybe. I think so. I think there is a correlation. And that was from Iowa X. Iowa X, I haven't seen you for a while. Let's see. Moving on down. Clean the filth of the others. Yep. How do you get your books into my bookstore? Mark Sinner Saint. You're not listed with any of the vendors that I know. Well, you can get them direct from the publisher. You can get them from Red Wheel Weiser. Since I would have sent you to New Page Books, but they've now been absorbed by Red Wheel Weiser. So you can go there. You can talk to Michael Pye, I believe, is still there. Otherwise, just message me, and I'll get you lined up. Thanks for asking that, Mark. Let's see. The Flood, Seth, Nephal. Nephal is a slightly different word, Antone. It's a slightly different word than Nephal is the. Let me think about that. It's. I've got to refresh my memory on that. I think Nephal is the base word, and im is put on the end, the suffix on the end. So Nephal, those who came down, those who left their first estate, or leaving your first estate, falling down, coming down, descending. You put the im on and it pluralizes it. Those who did those things. Let's see. Jeannie Griffith, painting. Good job. Thank you, Jeannie. Almost done with this thing. Yep. Children like music too, in vitro. And thank you, Michelle. I'll show it once it's all done. I'll probably walk through and do a video, and we'll put it to a little music. You know what's been playing here all day? My daughter's put on a looped version of Finding Nemo, the opening sequence to that. That music, just perfect. And it was great to paint to. I also had some Celtic metal on earlier, so he had quite a variety of music around here today. Trapper Mike from Minnesota. Glad I caught you on here. Glad to catch you here, Mike. And 24 Elders. Anton, are you talking about the Divine Council when you talk about the 24 Elders? The Divine Council, I think, when you look at the book of Enoch and it talks about the 200 principles who came from heaven and descended on the slopes of Mount Armon, they were supposed to be of the Elohim. And this begs a big question, too, by the way. Does the Bible teach monotheism or polytheism? Because does it teach anything at all in regard to that, or is it just obvious there that there's polytheism going on in the Old Testament? Let's see. Perfect. That would be sweet. Nice music. Same mind, Scotty. Trap Mike. I lived in Minnesota once. So there you go. I think I'm caught up with your comments. I've been going for 48 minutes on just an off-the-cuff saying, I should read the prologue online tonight. And so there you go, folks. I want to thank you for coming here and for listening. And we'll do this again. I don't know how soon, maybe tomorrow and maybe the next day, I'll be able to do the first chapter, Science Almighty, mixed into all the other stuff we do as well. So thanks for coming here. And by the way, if you go into my YouTube page, I did some readings from one of my other books. It's almost 2 years ago now, or maybe a little over 2 years ago. My fictional book, the Rollicking Adventures of Tam O'Hare. So if you ever want to hear I just did some snippets from those books, not reading the whole book. So you can go listen to that as well if you have the fancy to do so. So Kitten, thank you. Iowa X, thank you. Janine, thank you. Michelle, Michael, Antone, Mark, all of those of you who are here without scrolling up. So looks like, is Jeff on again, or is that still the old announcement? So thanks for coming in. And I have no exit strategy, so I'm just going to, so instead of just keep talking, I'm going to sign off. Thanks for being here, folks. Talk to you soon.